Hello all, my name is Sarah and I am part of your Comms 201 class, so without further ado, let's get started. So I want to start off by saying that according to the Harvard Business Review, most people believe that staying silent while listening is actually being an effective listener. But that's just not the case. There's so many things that we need to take into consideration when listening. We need to have our undivided attention, we need to show respect, so by staying silent it is a factor, but also understanding is a huge part of the listening process, is to be able to understand and then communicate back. So through this, I've looked over 4 studies in how they perceive communication and how other people perceive listening. They've all taken completely different routes on trying to study the process of listening, but one thing that stands the same is they all value the importance of studying listening, because it's very important for us as communicators to understand each other and to be able to comprehend each other before communicating with each other. So without further ado, let's go into the studies. So the first study that I looked at was the effects of listening styles. Now, in this study, this study was conducted by Dr. Michael Krauss, and it was published by the American Psychology Association. Now, in this study, it was a 5-part study, and they took 1,800 people, all who lived within the U.S., and all different age groups, and a diverse community pretty much. And what they did was they used qualitative data to collect their data, and what they did was they took people and they split them into 3 groups. And the first group was they could watch people and listen to people communicate. The second group was they could only listen to people communicate, not watch them. And then the third was a mixture of both. What happened was, as you can see in the data, is that people who listen rather than seeing actually end up doing way better and being more of an effective listener. The second study that we looked into was studying abroad to improve listening skills. This was conducted by Angeles Lanes and Beretta Goretta. These two used quantitative data to figure out the learning process. And what they did here was they took 12 students who all were from North America. All the students had at least some sort of prior knowledge or experience speaking language. Some had very little, some had a lot, and there was about 1 student who didn't know any of that. And what they did was they shipped them off to Costa Rica for 5 weeks to study abroad. And before they left, what they did was they had them take a test, and then when they came back, they took another test. And this was to detect how their listening improved while studying abroad. And it shows through their study that those who came back did a lot better with their listening skills. And the reason for this is because if you're put in a situation that you're very unfamiliar with, you have to figure out how to survive. You have to be able to listen and recognize and understand people to be able to navigate your way through these new areas, this unknown. So that's a really good thing to think into consideration when you're studying abroad. The third study that I looked at, was listening logs for confidence. And what happened here was this was conducted by Eugene Lee and Chang En from the University of Seoul in Korea. And what they did was they took 42 students from freshman to senior in all different age groups, and they gave them a catalog or a logbook, I would say, to log down each day their listening and what they heard, what they understood, what they found interesting. And through this study, they found out that by logging every day, and they did this throughout an entire semester, so you are aware, by logging every day provides more insight and understanding into becoming a better and effective listener. And again, being an effective listener can help us with being able to communicate with one another with little to no mistakes. Now, the fourth one that we looked into, the importance of effective listening skills, implications of the workplace, and dealing with difficult people. And with this study, it was conducted by the University of Southern Maine, and they took a little over 1,000 employees from the University of Southern Maine who were, had very diverse backgrounds, and they gave them a survey, and they collected their data through the survey. This survey had 4 topics that it went over. The first topic was how people perceived their own listening skills. And as you can tell from this chart that I have up here, is that 85% of them within the University of Southern Maine believed that they had effective listening skills. Now, they switched it and then they used perceiving others' listening skills within the workplace. Now, if you see from this data chart, it says that 84% of people believed that their colleagues or coworkers had good and effective listening skills. The third thing that it discussed was, and this is where it gets kind of interesting, is that how people perceive their own communication skills. 77% of people within the workplace at the University of Southern Maine believed that they had effective communication skills. But here's where it gets very interesting. People who perceived their coworkers or colleagues' communication skills was 21%. So 21% of people believed that by having that their colleagues had 21% of effective communication skills. Now, this is all really interesting, and it's really important that we continue to study communication as we go further in depth so that we can understand ourselves and ourselves as communicators. If I was to conduct this study, what I would do is I would take a bunch of participants, about 100 people, and I group them into 10 people. What I do is I try to categorize them by age to see what age has better listening skills, because I find that to be very interesting, is how age can affect us. And so what I would do is I'd place them in a room and I'd give them a simple task such as like a table to build. And I would let them be able to have as much time as they want, but it will be tested. It will be timed. And then I would also allow them to be able to work together and communicate together. And I'd also be logging in how they communicate, surveillancing them, and then also being able to collect data while doing it. But here's the trick. When I give them the task to build a table, I would be the one that would be speaking rather than them. So I would be the one that would give the instructions, and hopefully that they would understand. I would also count how many times they'd have to ask for the instructions again, and by that I'd collect data. So again, it's very important, the understanding of a listening process and being able to be effective communicators in any workplace, because being able to listen can help improve our relationships, it can help improve our workplaces, it can help improve anything of that nature, school, jobs, anything that we have going on in our lives. It's important that we have good listening skills so that we can be effective listeners. I hope that you all enjoyed my presentation.